I have created a practice review and I've navigated into it. And on the dashboard, you can see that study-centric data is enabled in 3 different ways. So you can see that on the status panel, there's a study-centric data indicator. There is a button to import study data. And there's also a new item in the left-hand navigation called Review Criteria. And so since we have now done a brief plan of the analysis, the first step in RevMan is to define the review criteria. So we'll navigate to this new section. And here you can see the intervention tab. So this tab is where you will be describing all the granular interventions when you want to do narrower analysis. So for example, if you want to compare a specific type of vitamin D with placebo, like we're doing in analysis 2. In this example, we've already added the control interventions and the experimental interventions here. And so note that you are expected to add both control and experimental interventions on the same screen. If we then move on to intervention groupings, you can see that I've added an intervention grouping, which is called vitamin D any form versus placebo. So this is looking at the wider, broader synthesis question. And we have added 2 intervention groups in that grouping. So one is placebo and one is vitamin D. And so important to note here is that you can only add 1 intervention in one of the groups. So it can only exist in one of the groups. If we move on to the outcomes tab, you will see that we have here defined 3 different outcomes. In the analysis that we're looking at today, we're only looking at 1 or more exacerbations, which is a dichotomous outcome. But as you can see, you can also add continuous outcomes. And moving on to the, and I should also note, so Rachel made a good point about saying that it's important to consider your time points. So if you are adding, if you want to do analysis for different time points, you will be adding 1 time point. So 1 outcome for each time point. So that's important to note. In the covariates tab, you can add covariates that you want to use to investigate sensitivity or to subgroup by. And you just give the covariate a name, and then you can add the covariate categories. So you can see here in this review, we're looking at daily dose with 2 different categories. You can see there are 2 tabs here, characteristics and risk of bias. These are basically set up for your reviews, for what characteristics and risk of bias domains you'll have. So normally you don't need to edit any of these